In this study we discuss urbanization and the study of urban change. This chapter is entirely about patterns of urbanization. It may seem strange to begin with a separate section on urbanization. This step is, however, essential because of the variety of ways in which the term has been used in the literature. Some have conceived of urbanization in the physical sense of the increasing area of land being developed for urban use, while others view urbanization as a social process of people adopting the attitudes and behavior traditionally associated with life in cities and towns, irrespective of where they might be living. Even when it is interpreted from the perspective of population geography so as to relate to the type of settlement in which people live, as it is for present purposes, the term has been applied in several different ways. According to which approach is taken, urbanization can be considered to be a continuing process, one that is long since over or one that is not currently very important but may undergo a resurgence, perhaps in cyclic fashion. The fact that the term has been elaborated by the attachment of various prefixes, as exemplified in the title of this chapter, suggests that our emphasis should be on urban change, rather than on urbanization. Traditionally, the most common way of measuring urbanization is in terms of the proportion of a national population that lives in urban places. Somewhat paradoxically, it is in this sense that urbanization appears to be a steadily continuing process. Yet this measure is now of virtually no value for studying urban change in advanced economies. The official figures, provided by national statistical agencies and summarized for broad regional groupings by the United Nations, indicate that around 3/4 of the population of the more developed world are considered to be urbanized. In the present context, the most important point is that the term urbanization is restricted to the first of the 4 stages, referring to the situation in which people are becoming more concentrated in a single urban region while that urban region is growing overall. Beyond this, a whole urban system can be deemed to be urbanizing if the majority of its urban regions are in this urbanization stage. The next 2 stages, however, are clearly meant to represent movements away from what might be considered to be pure urbanization, with the suburbanization stage involving decentralization within the urban region and the disurbanization stage signifying decentralization beyond the urban region, a process which Robert and Randolph, 1983, have termed deconcentration, to distinguish it from within urban region decentralization, and which equates broadly with Fielding's definition of counterurbanization. Fourthly, the urbanization stage is associated with the slowing of urban region decline, which is initiated by the core and followed by the ring and thus involves a process of renewed centralization. Finally, according to the cyclic element of this model, this leads through into renewed urban region growth and to a new period of urbanization. Next one is suburbanization. Suburbanization is by no means a new phenomenon, with its origins traceable in the building of large homes by more successful entrepreneurs on the outskirts of the burgeoning centers of industry and commerce over a century and a half ago. It became significant as an urban feature during the latter half of the 19th century as cheap forms of mass transit loosened the ties between home and workplace for those with secure jobs and relatively social hours of work. Subsequently, it accelerated as a result of further changes in transport and personal wealth, surging ahead especially strongly around mid-century, to the extent that in the stages of urban development model it is seen to have become the dominant element of urban change in the 1960s not only in the Anglo-American world but widely across Western Europe. Since then, however, the suburbs have, in one sense, been eclipsed by other developments, and at the same time have begun to undergo a revolution which appears to render the original terminology obsolete. The term suburb carries connotations of being something less than urbs, the city, usually residential or dormitory in character, being dependent on the city for occupational, shopping and recreational facilities. Johnston, 1981-331. The process has been very largely powered by the negative aspects of city cost, congestion, grime and squalor. Originally, it was dominated by the housing needs and aspirations of the family, with the emphasis very much on the male breadwinner and on healthy space in which the mother could devote her time to bringing up her children and providing for her husband. For some residents, the housing plot would be the sole concern, as everyday supplies would be delivered by firms or fetched by servants. Waste would similarly be carted away and children sent off to boarding school. Even when suburban residents broadened beyond the preserve of the upper middle class, however, the range of facilities would often be very limited: piped water, and possibly gas, supply, mains drainage in some areas, but often the cesspool, and in due course electricity, paved roads, primary school and retail outlets for everyday items, such as newsagent, grocer, post office and perhaps a garage for car maintenance, with the best services being available in strips along radial routes out of the city. The success of the suburbs in providing an escape from the problems of city living as well as allowing people to avoid the limited life chances of the deep countryside was, however, considered as definitely suboptimal by a number of commentators who decried the emerging compartmentalization of urban life, notably Ebenezer Howard, yet his Garden City idea, where residents would have easy access to the full range of urban facilities including jobs. COUNTERURBANIZATION. It is not only at the interface between city and suburbs that blurring has occurred, but also at the fringes of the metropolitan areas and functional urban regions, as the suburban frontier has moved outwards to encompass wide tracts of land and embrace formerly freestanding towns and villages. While there is a remarkable degree of correspondence between the various conceptualizations of interurban deconcentration, there continues to be heated discussion about whether it is really a qualitatively different phenomenon compared with suburbanization or an extension of it. Much hinges on the extent to which the growth of smaller cities and towns is the result of overspill to places that are new appendages of metropolitan territory, as opposed to arising from residents and employers seeking out these places to take advantage of their inherent characteristics, notably their smaller size and associated economic, social and environmental benefits. As we shall see, a central problem is that in more heavily populated regions it is very difficult, if not impossible, to distinguish between these two explanations purely by the examination of population redistribution patterns, but neither has been put forward to explain the recent recovery of larger cities, raising the question as to how long-lived this process is likely to be and whether it is significant enough to initiate a new round of urban growth and subsequent decentralization. Compared to the great attention which has been given to it subsequently, the originators of the stages of urban development model proposed the urbanization stage in a remarkably tentative manner. In the words of Clausen and Chemeny, 1981-16, it is not impossible that the large town, with its economic and cultural potentials, will in the course of time win back the ground it has lost, that people once more flock towards the city, and that the town starts upon a new period of bloom, which may lead to a new cycluses, emphasis added. They expressed reservations about the term itself, pointing out that this urbanization stage is one of continuous urban region decline and only towards the end of it is the core meant to move into absolute population growth. One might wish to reserve the term urbanization for the first phase of a second urban cycle. They admitted that there was so far no evidence of a second cycle, that only a few cities were as yet to be found in this fourth stage of the first cycle and that these were the wrong ones from the model's point of view, all being in the small size bracket rather than the largest cities in the most advanced stages of the cycle 1981. Finally, while they offered the possibility that this stage might come about through market forces, their main hopes were pinned on purposeful government action, as was made even clearer in the policy agenda set out in the follow-up study which explicitly states, urbanization must be brought about fast and resolutely.